Again, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this month's Acting for Justice event. My name is Jack Jezreel, and I serve on the staff of Just Faith Ministries. I'm joined tonight, as usual, by my colleague, Leela Oakley, and we're delighted you could join us. Let's begin our program this evening, as we typically do, with a prayer. And tonight's reflection is an excerpt from Pope Francis's encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. Good politics combines love with hope and with confidence in the reserves of goodness present in human hearts. Viewed in this way, politics is something more noble than posturing, marketing, and media spin. These sow nothing but division, conflict, and oblique cynicism, incapable of mobilizing people to pursue a common goal. At times, in thinking of the future, politicians would do well to ask themselves, why am I doing this? What is my real aim? For as time goes on, reflecting on the past, the questions will not be, how many people endorsed me? How many voted for me? How many had a positive image of me? The real and potentially painful questions will be, how much love did I put into my work? What did I do for the progress of our people? What mark did I leave on the life of society? What real bonds did I create? What positive forces did I unleash? How much peace did I sow? What good did I achieve in the position that was entrusted to me? Amen. Again, welcome everyone. To repeat, my name is Jack Jezreel, and I'm the founder of Just Faith Ministries, and I now serve on staff as senior advisor. For those of you unfamiliar with Just Faith Ministries, we create small group resources that help people explore the link between their faith and the work of justice and mercy in an intensive and challenging format. Over 70,000 people in over 2,000 churches and organizations across the country have participated in our programs, often with powerful results. Our informal tagline, Just Faith Changes People, Those People Change the World, speaks to these results. And speaking of results, I'd like to be the first to invite you to a special event. Please join us online for this year's third annual Impact Celebration on Thursday, September 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This year's event will feature a keynote presentation by New York Times bestselling author, national speaker, and public historian, Dr. Jemar Tisby. Dr. Tisby is the author of The Color of Compromise, The Truth About the American Church's Complicity in Racism, used in Just Faith Ministries' Faith and Racial Healing Program. Leela is putting the link to the event in the chat right now. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our speakers tonight. Our speakers are both staff members of the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, or NRCAT. Johnny Perez is the director of U.S. Prisons Program. He is a highly accomplished criminal justice reform advocate, public speaker, and thought leader in the field of ending torture and inhumane treatment in the U.S. prison system. As the director of the U.S. Prisons Program, he leads numerous campaigns to end solitary confinement and works to build the capacity of faith leaders and directly impacted communities to engage in education and legislative advocacy across the United States. Johnny is a dedicated dad and continues to mentor formerly incarcerated students at St. Francis College of Brooklyn, where he obtained his Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. He is also a professional photographer at Day One Pictures, which he founded. Laura Markle Downton is the Director of Faith and Community Engagement. She is a leading strategist and organizer in the field of criminal legal reform. Laura joined the staff of NRCAT in 2013 and works to resource and organize faith leadership involved in NRCAT's state and federal campaigns to end torture at the local and national levels. Laura has broad experience mobilizing faith communities to advance criminal legal system change and racial justice through building strategic partnerships and coordinating interfaith organizing campaigns. Laura holds an MDiv from Princeton Theological Seminary. Johnny and Laura, we are so glad you're here. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. It's great to be here.
Take it away.
All right, sounds good. Well, again, it's just really our pleasure and honor to be able to join with you all this evening. And I wanted to start off by just giving a little background about the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. I see actually we're joined tonight by our board president, Rabbi Joshua Levine Grader. So great to see that you're amongst us. We may have others as well. But for those who are less aware of NRCAT, we are an interfaith membership organization dedicated to ending torture and U.S. policy, practice, and culture. We are comprised of more than 300 religious organizations and have had over 75,000 individuals who have participated in our programs and activities through the years. Our diverse partners share a common commitment to advancing the values of human rights and human dignity and an end to torture without exception. To achieve our work, NRCAT engages in grassroots organizing, public education, and state and national policy advocacy. And Johnny and I will be talking more specifically about those efforts tonight. Our membership includes representation from every major religious tradition, and interfaith partnership is really the heart of our work and what we do. The one thing I also wanted to note, just for context setting for tonight, is that we are gathering on June 29th, which is still part of Torture Awareness Month. Torture Awareness Month was first established as a way to remember June 26th of 1987, when the nations of the world took a major first step against the immoral and abhorrent practice of torture. And on that day, the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment or Punishment entered into force. And the UN later declared June 26th, the International Day in support of victims of torture. So just wanted to take a moment as we start to honor victims of torture and honor that this month is itself Torture Awareness Month. So a fitting time for us to be able to join with you all. One of the key areas of work to end torture that NRCAT is most focused on is the topic that brings us to tonight's conversation, and that's the torture of solitary confinement. And so with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Johnny, to hear more.
Nice, thank you. And thank you, Jack and others, for bringing us together in this space. And thank you for all of you to making time today. Like literally, you can be anywhere else and you decided to spend your time with us. So that's not lost on me as a person who's really acquainted with time and how we spend our time. My name is Johnny Perez. As was mentioned, I work as the director of United States Prison Programs for the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, where I work with faith leaders and solitary survivors, just like myself, to advance legislation around solitary to end this practice and policy, culture and practice. We want to talk about a number of things today. I want to give you kind of like an overview of solitary confinement, sort of like the 101 for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, and then maybe give you some updates for those of you who are a little bit more aware of the issue, and then talk about the important things, specifically, the importance of the role of faith leaders in this movement, and also the importance of those who've been directly impacted by the issue in this movement, and then have a larger conversation about how maybe we can all work together toward this common goal around compassion, second chances, and other values that are reflective of not only our faith communities, but ourselves as well. And during the conversation, please feel free to be interactive. So, it's one thing to me just talking at you, but I want to talk with you. I think we want to talk with you. So please drop any questions or comments or even reactions to any things that we say in the comments. We will be sure to respond to all of them, or we'll do our best, given our time. There's a lot of work happening, so we'll also try to make sure that we give you the most robust kind of feedback that we can from our perspective. And hopefully, we'll all walk out of this not only more informed, but also a little bit motivated about, the future and what our criminal justice system can look like, should look like, and our role in that. Does that make sense? Thumbs up, reactions. Great, thank you, y'all. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. I believe, is this going to be recorded for the organizers? Okay, great. So, so please do not, don't bother about taking notes. This will be completely shared. You can pause it later, and then you can always contact, Laura and I to find out any more information and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Okay, there we go. And Laura, thank you so much for giving, an overview of our organization, our background, how we are comprised and really, it's more than just faith community. I think that it's when you have people who come around shared values, you'd be surprised about the change that we can make. And we've seen some changes in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut that we're going to get into. But thank you again, Laura, for breaking that down. So when it comes to solitary confinement, really quick, I'll say this is an overview piece, right? Like, why does it even exist in the first place? And part of this piece is that, many of the people who are currently incarcerated, or even convicted people in one shape, way, or form are not even looked at as human in the first place. And this is how we're able to even give ourselves permission in the first place to treat people inhumanely. I, spent 3.5 years in solitary confinement for smoking pot. And I tell people all the time, I'm not promoting drug use, but there's nothing like getting 15 years in jail at 21 years old, and 15 years in prison to, make you want to smoke a joint. And the department's reaction to that, and I think is reflective of the larger reaction to our larger society, right? Where we respond to almost all of our needs, all of our social needs with punishment and incarceration. The same way that we respond to incarceration the same way that we respond to homelessness with incarceration, mental health with incarceration, even poverty in terms of bail with incarceration. We see this exact same reactions inside of our prison systems, where people, who use substances are reacted to with a deeper form of incarceration. In this case, solitary confinement, 23 hours a day or more locked inside of a cell that is, as you can see here in the illustration, for my colleague Laura, that is no longer than both of your hands stretched apart. And I'm 6 feet tall and I can touch both walls. And Laura's a little bit shorter than me. And, she can almost also reach just to give you some context and idea of what the scale is if you've never have never been there. I'll say right now I don't have my glasses on, so if you see me squinting, but after years of not being able to see just 6 feet in front of you, it also affects your eyesight and affects your ways, your life and physicality in other ways, which I'll share, in a minute. Let me see if I can move the full screens here, just to make sure. Okay, that's probably better there. Awesome. Thank you all. So where we see injustice, right, and abuse, in this case, internationally recognized dehumanization of an entire class of people. We also see like this dehumanization, right? We see it not only in architecture, right? It cells are 6 feet tall. There's no direct sunlight. The drab colors, right? There's gray, brown. And I love earth tone colors, I tell you, but there's nothing like seeing a red and orange and green. And many people incarcerated are not able to see that in a lot of different ways and a lot of different years at a time. Right, in places where they have no constant light. What does it mean to the human body to not receive direct sunlight? And that's only in the architecture. But in the day-to-day life, the messages that people receive, it's even reflective in our language, how we dehumanize currently incarcerated people. We call them convicts. Correction officers say, hey, how many bodies do you have? How many heads do you have? We say inmates. DIN number stands for Department Identification Number. It depends on what state. But there's a variation of you're just reduced down to a number. In fact, this number is more important than your social security number or even your birth date. Ex-con, prisoner, we hear these names. But what they all have in common is that it gives us permission to treat people inhumanely. Here's why. Because there's something I can do to a convict that I can't do to somebody's daughter. There's something I can do to an ex-con that I can't do to somebody's grandfather or somebody's son. And we somehow give ourselves this kind of like, unconscious permission to accept these policies that only serve to not only further dehumanize people, but also exacerbates the problem if we are to reduce and eradicate crime as we see it, and in this case, behaviors inside of prison, which we can talk about which behaviors are even deemed lawful and unlawful in this space, and we'll put that to the side for now, but really want you to reflect on not only how we've given ourselves permission as a society to treat an entire class of people like trash. We do it in our architecture, and thanks God that, you know, some of the work that we've done with the American Institute of Architects, where their ethics committee has deemed spaces of torture, including death row and solitary confinement, to be unethical according to their standards. So even architects agree that we should not be designing these spaces. And if you hear closely, you'll hear the language and how we allow ourselves permission to do so. And even more so, even in our blueprint to this country, you know, some may call it the Constitution, where we see that there is no involuntary servitude except for, and please drop this in the comments, but for those who are incarcerated. And we give ourselves permission to treat these folks inhumanely in a number of different ways. So much so that today we have 122,000 people who are locked inside of these spaces, no bigger than a parking lot. And this is a new report that came out from the Unlock the Box campaign, which NRCAT proudly sits on the steering committee of, along with a number of other allies, including Solitary Watch, which also partnered on this groundbreaking report, which actually tells the true numbers of how many people are in solitary for how long in a given time. Where people are like 23 to 24 hours a day in practice, no meaningful human contact. Again, what does it mean not to be able to hug anyone? What does it mean not to be able to see anyone? Not to be able to look at somebody directly in their eyes? What does it mean not to look at yourself in the mirror after years out of time? And then you're put inside of this space, whether you got into a fight, whether you use somebody else's phone number to talk to your family, whether you're somebody wearing somebody else's t-shirt, or in my case, in this case, using substances, and you still don't get the programs that are meant to address the problem that got you there in the first place. On top of deplorable conditions, to the extent that you have to plug your ears so mice, roaches don't get in your ears, and not to be vulgar here, but I really want to give you out a reality and up close and personal about what this actually feels and looks like. Many cells don't have direct sunlight, as I mentioned. We're talking about showers. We have the privilege of taking showers every day, but many people who are in solitary, take showers 2 to 3 times a week. No intellectual stimulation. So you have one book to read a week. And I can tell you, if you think you can't read 500 pages in a day, just lock yourself in the bathrooms from 7 a.m. till 7 a.m. You'll knock that out. Lack of due process. So what does that mean? Once I'm here, how can I actually get out? I've seen appeals written in tissue paper because people only get 5 pieces of tissue, or their pen only is enough to write 3 pieces of response because they just don't have enough ink inside of their pens. And then any behavior that you receive inside of solitary in many states only leads to more time in solitary, which then leads more time in solitary. Many harms to not only incarcerated people, including mental health issues that people, continuously have to fight with for the rest of their life, paranoia, distortions of perception, increased suicide for risk, and even increased risk for suicide, homicide, and overdose. Not only them, but here it is that we think that these issues only affect the community, right? I'm assuming people who are incarcerated. We think that if we just punish them, they'll change the behavior, not knowing that the punishment exacerbates the behavior, but never think how that actually affects their families. Because for every person incarcerated, there's a family member. For every family incarcerated, there's a community. And for every community incarcerated, there's a district. And for every district, there's a state. And for every state, there's a country. So these people are directly released from solitary confinement, these sensory deprived situations, right into a place like 42nd Street, where you are sensory overload, the cacophony of different languages, different colors, the Statue of Liberty is fighting with Elmo, and this person is trying to adapt to a newfound reality. Family members find it hard to reconnect to people who have been incarcerated and specifically held in solitary because of the trauma that they've held or has been exasperated or even acquired while they've experienced solitary confinement. Families are not trained and prepared to receive family members who've experienced long-term solitary confinement. They experience weak family ties because many of these facilities where the state, local, or federal are very far away from their loved ones. And before I go on, this is actually Layleen Polanco. Her sister died in solitary confinement, and the security guard, the correctional officers, laughed at her sister while she pleaded for help while she died in solitary. It is important for me to uphold her name and vision because she is a leader in the New York campaign right now, as we continue to fight at the city level there. And look, and this is not even one-sided, right? Because I'll tell you that one thing about incarceration, and when you put good food in a dirty bowl, it affects everybody. In this case, also the people that work inside of these correctional facilities. And that includes correctional officers who studies have shown have high stress levels, burnout, high stress levels, burnout, fatigue above other professions, increased evitability. And what does that mean, right? What does that mean? When you have somebody like this take care of your child, and I say this as a father, my daughter's 23 years old, going on 50, and my son just turned 5 years old. But when I have this person, if my daughter committed, if my daughter needed to be held accountable to the highest degree, who would I want to watch over her while she's being held accountable? Correctional officers have higher mental health consequences around depression, PTSD, increased rates of suicide, and of course, direct and vicarious trauma just because of the environment and the architecture. And despite all of that, I will say that there is good news. We've made a lot of strides, and I'll highlight some really quick points that in recent years, about 26 states have introduced 63 pieces of legislation to limit solitary confinement. A few highlights: Florida, Louisiana, Nebraska, New Jersey, Washington, Virginia, all have passed legislation to abolish solitary, not only for youth, but also women who are expecting. What does that mean? That means that we live in a country that finds it okay to shackle women while they're giving birth. Is what I'm saying. In the last 5 years, we've seen 45 pieces of legislation that have passed with, of course, mental health and exclusions for vulnerable populations have led that way. New Jersey, New York, Connecticut have passed progressive legislation in their respective states. And right now we're hoping, fingers crossed, with California, which I can tell you about in a little bit more. And we also live in a country where our existing president vowed on a campaign trail to end solitary confinement if he is elected. Most of the people agree with us. 86% of American voters support reforms in congressional legislation that would end the solitary confinement. And I'll say this honestly between us. We all agree that we should end. We just disagree on the how. A few really quick trends before I actually introduce a video. So I saw 5 key trends that I want all of us to really remember. And again, this will all be shared later. We can share the PowerPoint and pause the video. But since 2018, 5 key trends have emerged. Ending solitary confinement for young people, ending solitary confinement for other vulnerable groups. That includes people who are 65 and older, who may be physically vulnerable, who may be intellectually or mentally vulnerable. Women who are expecting, people from the LGBTQI community who are largely placed in these places for administrative reasons and not because they created any type of infraction against departmental rules. A third trend that we see is implementing comprehensive limits to solitary to 15 days. And I'll tell you right now that at the federal level, we hope that we can all get your support, but we're trying to go even further than that. Creating reporting and oversight, because who watches those who watch others? And of course, ending solitary confinement completely for all people, because all people deserve compassion, all people deserve second chances, all people deserve the actual health, all the actual services that they need. And we understand that punishment doesn't fix the problem, but exasperates it. With that being said, and please drop any questions, any reactions in the comments. We're going to take a quick pause, and we'll take 3 minutes to show a video. One of our leaders, Cynthia. Oh, I should say Alvarado. Oh, I should say Alvarado. Yo, sorry, not Alvarez. And this is a typo. It's important that we get her last name right. And that's my bad. But this is a part of a 30. We did a video series called Humans Out of Solitary Project that involves 30 solitary survivors who've all experienced solitary confinement, sharing thoughts and ideas and reactions from their perspective. from the direct experience of solitary, but also with the hope to see that our charge would be in a lot of different ways. So with permission to do so and see no rebuttals, I'll go ahead and play that. Is that okay? All right, thank you, y'all. I know it's a lot, so please react in the comments, and I'm gonna go ahead and play this video. Please text me or let me know if you do not hear the video. I'm gonna go press play now. Okay.
As a society, we value community, public safety, and even second chances. Yet, across the United States, there are countless people who are being subjected to the torture of solitary confinement. And although many have not survived such dehumanizing conditions, for those who do, they have lived long enough to tell their truth, share their journeys of resilience, and more importantly, to challenge our moral compass.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Here's what they had to say.
So my name is Cynthia Alvarado. I was wrongfully convicted in Philadelphia. I spent 12 years in a state prison. I'm an abolitionist. I'm tied with Abolitionist Law Center. I do a lot of nonprofit work to bring light to many innocent people who are in prison via my media platform on Instagram. We believe in our children. We believe in our communities for real. And this is why we do what we do, so that our children are safer. But prison doesn't do that. It warehouses you. It limits your education. It doesn't help your mental health. If anything, it induces mental health issues. Solitary is horrible. It's horrible, and I sometimes can't even believe that I'm here right now. You know, that I was so lucky to make it out, because I know that there's people in there still enduring solitary. You know, it's an evil system. It's a nightmare, and I'll never shut up about it. That's how horrible it is. You know, it's just disgusting. It's disgusting that as Americans, we even still use solitary confinement. You would think that we would have moved past that, but obviously in our country, we really seem to be stuck. You know, you already lose so much when you go to prison, but you have no contact visits, barely go call your family. You know, you're starving in there, literally starving. You know, you have really no outlets, and it just messes with your self-esteem. It's filthy because they don't let you really clean your cell. I mean, you can't have anything in there. You're talked to like less of a person, you know, and then you're expected to operate like this, you know, upstanding citizen when they're just beating you down. Since I was released, I've been on go. And what I mean was that the nightmare that I had just survived, right, was so bad that it's like every morning that I wake up, the only thing I think about is liberation. You know, how can I help liberate some of these people? What can I do to help my community? You know, whether it's, you know, speaking or, you know, calling lawyers or spreading the word, you know, via social media. It's what I do nonstop, you know. I have a lot of scars from prison. Prison really messed me up. It messed me up to the point where I don't know if I'll ever be the same. But I can say that I'm strong, and I met some amazing people, and I don't give up because I didn't give up in there, and I'm not gonna give up out here because I know that they need me in there. So.
Okay, we all thank Cynthia. Just drop a thank you, Cynthia, in the comments. I can't see the comments already, but she's not here with us today. She's in Pennsylvania. This is one of 30 videos that we have around the Humans Out of Solitary Project, and we definitely want to invite you all to share some of these videos in your own spaces, and even invite people like Cynthia into your space to be. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to my colleague, Laura, and she's going to talk briefly about the role of faith leaders. It's all you, Laura. Just
Great. Thank you, Johnny. And yeah, just to underscore the power of the Humans Out of Solitary videos, if anyone is interested in, let's say, opening a meeting that you have coming up with one of the clips, they're all short, about 3 minutes long, but it's a great way to sort of ground a meeting in this reality. Or if you're going to be meeting with a legislator, it's a great opportunity to get some of these stories these human stories that really challenge the dehumanizing narratives around the people that are being subjected to these conditions. Just go to NRCAT.org, NRCAT.org. Many of these videos are available there, and we are going to be continuing to release. I know Johnny said we have 30 in total that are on their way to you. The role of the faith community as an ally in this movement cannot be overstated. It's each of us has a role to play, and one of the interviews that's contained in a Torture in Our Name, the documentary that we released just last year, I'll be telling you a little bit more about, but a leader from New Jersey's campaign, Anthony Hinton, says at the end, basically, this is something that is being done in your name. It's a punishment that's being carried out to protect you, to protect us with our tax dollars. And so we each have a job and a role to play to say, no, I don't need that kind of protection. In fact, I reject this form of dehumanizing treatment and punishment. It does nothing to serve the community. So NRCAT has really looked at how do we resource our faith community partners who want to be involved with spreading the word. And so I just want to talk about ways that communities of faith have done that through some of our multimedia projects. So you've been able to see a Humans Out of Solitary piece. Last year, we launched a 35-minute documentary called Torture in Our Name that takes a deep dive look at state campaigns in New York, New Jersey, and Louisiana, where survivors of solitary confinement and their loved ones have mounted successful legislative campaigns, and faith communities have been powerful allies in those efforts. This film is very much an invitational film. It's an inspirational film. It's something that I would encourage you to consider screening with your house of worship or community of faith. In a number of state campaigns, individuals have used the film, screened it in their house of worship, and then invited legislators to come and be a part of seeing it. NRCAT makes available stipends to ensure that a survivor of solitary confinement or their loved one can be a part of any event like that, speaking. It's really important to us that the individuals being compensated for their labor when they're taking on a role like that. So that's something that Johnny or I would love to work with you on. If this sparks for you, perhaps wanting to do a screening of Humans Out of Solitary or Torture in Our Name as a first step. We've done a lot of that kind of programming work with folks around the country. We'd love to do that with you. In addition, I know that sometimes people like to do adult education series. So the film is also broken up on our website into 3 shorter vignettes that tell the story of each state campaign. So you could do, some folks have done like a 3-week series that way. We also have an interfaith discussion guide available for download also on our website, as well as a promotions guide. So we call this our Just Add Water. We really want to make this as easy as possible for your community to embrace some of these stories and really look at how you can leverage them with decision makers in your state or in your area. We have had many different examples from around the country of how faith communities have engaged. I want to share just a couple more to just spark your ideas and thinking. A number of communities of faith have chosen to take the 23rd of every month to remember that on average, individuals in solitary are in confinement 23 hours a day, and will meet monthly for a vigil on the 23rd of each month to remember the individuals currently enduring these conditions in their state or in their county. Some have worked with local advocacy organizations to actually have names to read so that the individuals who are inside are not forgotten, but are remembered at those vigils. So that's something else to consider. some people take a first step of adding individuals enduring solitary confinement in their state to their weekly prayer list, whatever that looks like for your community. But I want you to be thinking about what are ways that we can stay connected in an ongoing way in order to break down a system that has really been set up to separate us and in a way that's dehumanizing for all of us. The other thing I'll mention, NRCAT does obviously a lot of work with allies in the faith community to support legislative change. Just last year in California, with the historic California Mandela Act, which passed both the state assembly and the Senate last year and would prohibit prolonged isolation beyond 15 days and prohibit it outright for the most vulnerable, both in prisons, jails, and for-profit immigrant detention centers in that state. In order to urge Governor Newsom to sign that bill into law, over 37 religious organizations joined NRCAT in sending a letter to the governor urging him to sign that bill into law. As many of you know, or those who follow California politics, the bill was not signed into law. It is back in play this year and actually just recently earned a supermajority in the state's assembly. So we will again be are working with our allies there. As Johnny mentioned, we are part of a groundswell of activity with New Jersey being the first state to abolish prolonged isolation legislatively in 2019, followed by New York State and Connecticut. And many similar, what we call Mandela type bills, or bills modeled off the Mandela rules, which are the updated standard minimum rules for the treatment of incarcerated people from the United Nations that call for a ban on solitary beyond 15 days. We're really looking at how do we support that in legislatures state by state around the country. So whatever state you're in, there are currently 20 active state campaigns that we're working in. Before we close today, I'll actually connect you with a link where you can check out if there's an active campaign already in your state. Whether or not that there is, each of us has a role to play. And I think that the moral voice of the religious community and the leadership of directly impacted people are really such important pieces of this puzzle. So with that, Johnny, I want to turn it back over to you to hear about the work around the national network.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that is that is the sauce. You have faith leaders, who can morally hold our legislators accountable to the values they stand on, and also folks who, directly experience the issues that we're all working on. And in addition to faith leaders, we also work directly with solitary survivors, people who experience solitary confinement. This quote comes up to me. I forgot exactly who mentioned this, but I wanted to add it as a reminder that as we gain our freedom, or as we enjoy our freedom, as we have our freedom, is our responsibility to liberate others. We work with solitary survivors in a number of ways. And one of the projects that I'm particularly excited about is being able to launch a national solitary survivors network, where we are looking to identify solitary survivors all across the country and work with them in 3 distinct ways, specifically through public education, through connecting them to our countless or numerous legislative efforts, and also to provide some internal supports to them in the form of mentoring. And we're super excited that we finally be able to have hired a coordinator to be able to lead that. And hopefully you'll meet Michael soon. He served 15 years in solitary. Here I am, I served 3.5 years in solitary confinement. Michael served 15 years in solitary confinement in Pelican Bay Prison, California, and my experiences in New York. And as I travel the country and meet other men and women and even young people who have experiences, I'm never surprised about how gruesome and punishment thirsty our system is, And, we're coming up on 10 years of celebrating the hunger strikes in California. That also included family members who also went on hunger strikes with their family members inside, asking for, all basic things that a lot of us take for granted, and some of us will be in California soon to kind of recognize that 10-year anniversary of all of those sacrifices. But, if you don't remember anything about tonight's webinar, just know that, we live in a country that has such an appetite for punishment that we're willing to sacrifice our own morality in order to carry that out. And as faith leaders, we have not only the moral good on our side, but I think it's even it's imperative of us to be able to lead that conversation and protect the very moral fabric of our society that keeps us together. Solitary survivors, one part of the issue that you can do, even when you walk out of here, if you didn't get the language piece before, definitely call us people. But one is to just create proximity around the issue. These are people who've been silenced for years, who've been quieted. Part of our work is to, build the capacity to speak at public forums, not only share their direct experience with solitary confinement, but also to, provide solutions to the policy changes that we want to see that are all reflective of our values. Sharing those narratives by amplifying their voices, creating opportunities for these solitary survivors to share experiences, not only through, universities and at press conferences, et cetera, but even the Humans Out of Solitary Project, which has those 30 videos that we mentioned. We've been very successful in getting that in public media. I mean, if you haven't seen it already, we will be happy to share it. But one of our first videos was amplified by USA Today, which was Donna Hilton, who shared her experience, as a woman who was incarcerated as a young woman in the New York system. And also very recently, another young man, Joseph De La Ruz, who, also served time in New York, but was able to share his experience, and that ended up on the, oh my God, Lord help me out here. It's the
Last Week Tonight with John
Yes.
Oliver on HBO.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to post some links, Johnny, and put them in the chat so folks
Okay,
can
great.
see those. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And you can say I don't watch too much HBO because I'm like this in a row, but with about close to 4 million views, I'm super proud of that work and being able to get, Joseph's voice in such mainstream media. And he's particularly describing why people end up in solitary. And you will be surprised about why are some of the reasons that people, land in solitary. So I want to also challenge you all to also challenge the media, which you see sometimes in the media, and how it demonizes people and how it spreads this false narrative. You have people in solitary literally because they have on the wrong color shirt, for days, weeks, months at a time. There was a 16-year-old, and this true story. There was a 16-year-old in Binghamton County Jail. He threw a spitball at a correction officer. They gave him 60 days in solitary. Now look, no, he should not have been spending spitballs. As a dad, I can tell you that we're not tolerating spitballs. I know some adults that still throw spitballs, I'll say that. But did he deserve, 60 days in a box? Absolutely not. I would not be happy if I found out my daughter was in a box for that. So again, it just really challenges what we've become accustomed to, and also what our leaders are saying that we want in our name. Hence why it's so important to be able to call legislators, engage our local congresspeople, and say, hey, I don't know what's going on up there, but as far as my vote is concerned, I'm not supporting this. Let me move my screen here. And what you see here are leaders from the various number of states. This picture was taken a few years ago, so we have some additions. But these are all directly impacted solitary survivors who are leading legislative efforts in their respective states. Connecticut, New Jersey, New Mexico, California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, Arkansas, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, and I'm probably missing a few, Connecticut. Even Jack, I gave Jack a hug when I first met him. He spent 40 years in solitary confinement at Pelican Bay, 40. I'm 44 myself, and during the hunger strikes, he talks about how some of the correction officers would actually order like filet mignon, bacon, whatever you like, whatever smells good. and would put it on a cart, and they would walk down a cart very slowly, trying to get them to break their hunger strike fast, knowing that in an environment like the penitentiary, like nobody's supposed to break their fast, right? Like it can actually put people's lives in danger, you know. And instead of changing the rules and hearing what they had to say, they would rather try to entice them and take it as a game. And it gets really dark, yo. Looking at the time right here, we actually don't have time to watch Natasha White's video, but that's completely fine. We want to even give you more of a reason to visit our website and get access to those 30 videos, or actually we've released a number of videos, and we're going to continuously release a video in the coming months. And Cynthia's video is the most recent one that we shared. But again, if you want to do some programming in your respective spaces, it doesn't have to be in a congregation. It can be 6 people in the living room who can make change. Like New Jersey started like that, in fact. You know, and sometimes that's enough when you have just a small group of dedicated, you know, people around shared values who decide to say, you know what, we're not going to stand for this, you know, and you'll be surprised how it grows. Sorry. With that, I'm going to actually give it back to Laura to talk about some next steps, and then potentially, of course, pass it back over to Jack and Layla for maybe some breakout sessions and questions. Thanks again, yo.
Great. Thank you, Johnny. And I'm mindful of the time, so I will run through this list quick, but I wanted to make sure that we presented with you all with a menu of ideas of potential next steps in engaging with us. NRCAT has a national pledge. It's a moral call to end solitary confinement. I would invite you, well, let me say all of this will also be sent to you after we meet today. So I just want to make you aware of what will be coming to you, but these links will be important to draw your attention to. So the first is to sign our national pledge. That is a great way to get you connected to ongoing updates from NRCAT, both when we're inviting you to take action on federal legislation, as well as legislation that may be advancing in your state. The second is obviously, as we mentioned, to organize a screening of NRCAT's film, Torture in Our Name, being mindful that we have a discussion guide, and we'll be happy to work with you on that event. To urge you to join or invite others to join NRCAT's national network of solitary survivors that Johnny shared about. So at this link, you'll find a form that could be shared with any individual that you think might be interested in joining the network. So we would love for you to help us spread the word by sharing it. Obviously, to join one of the 20 state campaigns that are actively working to end the torture of solitary. These are campaigns that are all affiliated with the Unlock the Box campaign. NRCAT was a founding member of Unlock the Box. Unlock the Box was founded by survivors, individuals from the mental health community and the legal community and the faith community, all coming together to say, how do we pull all of the best of who we are to end this practice in 10 years? So it's an ambitious goal, it's an ambitious vision. And so please take a look to see if you haven't connected with the campaign in your state, or if there's not one in your state, contact me and Johnny, let's talk about how we can change that. Obviously inviting you to share one of the Humans Out of Solitary videos, perhaps on social media, perhaps as an opening reflection at an upcoming meeting. And lastly, as we noted, June being Torture Awareness Month, even thinking about next year, if you're planning, and I know we have to think think out long term when we're planning in our communities. So what might you do for Torture Awareness Month next year? How might you work that into the yearly calendar of your community? So these are just a few ideas, but what we want to leave you with is a sense of both our eagerness to work with you and just while the situation is dire and these realities are dire, the opportunities to engage are abundant. And so we hope that you'll find what your piece of this is. So with that, I'll pass it back to you all, Jack and Layla. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And gosh, Johnny and Laura, that presentation was just so impactful. I'm moved, and I'm not even sure I really want to talk right now, but I will. But thank you for that. This is important work, and we're so blessed to have you with us tonight to share your work and the opportunities available to us. Now we'd like to give all of you who are here tonight a chance to talk. We're going to break into small groups for 10 minutes. And Leela's going to post a couple of questions in the chat so we can talk together about tonight's presentation. May I suggest you simply introduce yourself and then jump right into the questions. Pick one of the questions that you want to answer and then jump right in. So as soon as I stop talking, Leela's going to send you an invitation to join a breakout room. Please join in, share some of your own life's wisdom, and we'll reconvene in just 10 minutes for some Q&A time with Laura and Johnny. Thank you. While we're waiting for the most extroverted person to figure out who they are, Johnny and Laura, could I ask this question? It came up in the chat earlier, and I thought it was interesting. Somebody asked, let's see, is solitary confinement used in private detention centers that house refugees and asylum seekers? That's the question.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, and then the challenging part of the answer is the lack of data that we have around the sheer scope and number. So we know that the use of solitary confinement is persistent in for-profit immigrant detention facilities. There is not a sort of protection mechanism there to prevent it. We know that, so what we don't know and where we're limited is being able to convey it by number. And that's part of why we made sure to share the study with the Unlock the Box and Solitary Watch study tonight with the data of, on any given day, 122,000 individuals facing solitary in US federal and state prisons, prisons and jails. It had been very challenging to even get a snapshot that included that number. And so as you think about the numbers, what we know is the 122,000 on any given day, and then knowing that this reality also persists in immigrant detention. So that number doesn't encompass those individuals. Yeah.
And there's another question that came in the chat. Let me just take a look real quick. No. Another question, Rosa also asked, those who advocate for solitary confinement, what is their argument?
I can jump in on that. I think in the first, but I think generally when it's like a two-part answer, right? One part is we've been taught that the only response to any behavior is solitary. The same way that we've been taught that any response to homelessness, mental health issues, poverty is incarceration. There's that ideology, that thinking that, well, the more that we punish you, the more that'll make you change your behavior, without knowing that the punishment in itself exasperates the behavior. And I'm not a psych student, but I think we can understand how that works in practicality, especially if you're a parent. Then the other part is around safety. And the truth of the matter is that solitary actually exasperates the harms for officers and even themselves because of the conditions, and unnecessarily puts officers more at risk. I talked really briefly and fast about the direct harms to officers, community, and people, and what does it look like when you put somebody who needs anger behavioral management in a cell with no windows, no human contact, 3 meals a day, the last meal is at 7 o'clock at night, next meal is at 7 o'clock in the morning? You're like, oh, well, check your attitude. And the other side of that, what does it mean to see harm face to face every single day, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And shut down a part of yourself that allows you to actually perpetuate the harm. It's like the person that's only job is to insert the serum in the death chamber. That's their only job. By the way, that is a job. You can the only right? And what does that do to people internally? So there's a thing about safety, and then there's just this idea that we've gotten to a place in this country that we think that punishment is the only answer to all of our challenges around holding people accountable, even in these settings.
Another question that just came up is, how is solitary managed? In other words, who is it, court controlled? Is it local prison whim or what?
Donnie, I can take this one and then please jump in. But I shared in the chat so that folks have this language, but it's often startling to people to realize, given the harm, that neither a judge nor jury is sentencing someone to solitary confinement. This is something practice that we have left to the discretion of correctional staff. And therefore, there is so little oversight and often even rationale needed in order for its use. So Johnny, I don't know if you want to add to that, but I just wanted to make it crystal clear that this is not something decided by the courts. This is something we have, a decision we have left in the hands of correction officers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the only one thing I'll add to that is that, and then in turn, what we see on the legislative side or on the organizing side is that many departments of correction deny that it even exists. Name the state, and I can tell you somewhere public where they say, well, we don't have that here. We have behavioral modification units. We have administrative segregation for my folks in California. We have all of these other things that are not solitary in name, but are solitary in practice and in spirit. So because it's not ordered by the court, it also gives them the opportunity to move the cheese around the maze, for lack of a better term, right? To call it whatever they want to call it, because they're the ones calling it and not the court. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to add to that. Thank you, Laura.
Let me ask those who are on the call whose faces I can see. If you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand so I don't interrupt you again. So if somebody here would, Rosa, you want to ask a question? And Carol, I see your hand too. So
that's Carol.
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Okay, I was just wondering if when someone is put in solitary, do they have any ability to even communicate that fact to the outside world, that somebody can kind of monitor them or help them in some way?
I can take that on, Laura. You can add on paper, yes. You know, you're supposed to have access to mail, access to the courts. Like you have a constitutional right to have access to the courts, right? Like, let's just make sure that we understand that part. No matter where you at, you always supposed to have access to the courts in this country. Also have access to mail. And even in some states, you may, behave well enough to get to a level where you may get, a 10-minute call with your family once a month. And the way that it works in practice, though, is that you have states like California and Pennsylvania that are sending your mail to Florida to be scanned and then sent to you. So you miss your appeal deadline. Or in practice, you get only 5 sheets of paper per week, but your appeal is 20 pages long, and you got 30 days to send that in. And your pen only has enough ink for 3 pages. This is in practice. This is in practice the way that it works. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe you were mad about the fact that you didn't get an extra slice of bread and you said a few choice words to the correction officer, and now suddenly your mail doesn't go out anymore. And your lawyer's like, what appeal? This is the reality that we live in. I'll give you some more cases, and I can send in an article about this, because shout out to the journalists, when they get it right, who actually found that correction officers in New York were actually modifying grievance forms to match their complaints about the HALT Act and the effectiveness of it. So we've been actually effective in New York, but if you leave it to the correction officers, we haven't been. But they've been deliberately undermining it so much that where they've modified documents to that point. And, I forget the journalist that uncovered that, but that's what we're up against, So it's like a nuanced kind of response there, but I think we're kind of clear about what's happening here.
Thanks, Johnny. Let me go to Rosa and then John.
So I have found more and more that it is important to follow the money. And in all of this, is there any organization or group that is investigating who is financing private detention centers, regular prisons, and who is investing in all of that.
Mhm.
Because I've been surprised at what the Catholic Church has been investing in.
Mhm. Rosa, I think that's a really important point, and I think it's one that we have to ask. The reality with solitary confinement is that a majority of the people who are facing these conditions are being held in state-run facilities or federal facilities. So these are facilities that are being paid for by everyone's tax dollars. Many of the for-profit detention centers have tended to opt for lower security level work, and then have done it very cheaply. And then which has led to a myriad of human rights abuses. But I think one of the things that we have to grapple with when it comes to solitary is this is baked into the institutions that we have set up within our criminal legal system. I mean, we have constructed entire supermax facilities at the federal level and in our states that are built literally only to warehouse people in these conditions. And so, when we're following the money in this conversation, in part, we have to follow it to our own state houses and to the very institutions that are set up for us to be quote unquote protected by.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. John, you get the last question of the evening.
So thanks. So I'll abuse my position. I have two questions, but I'll be short. So thanks, Jack. The institutional rate or institutional abuse of incarceration or confinement like that, it's obvious. And I appreciate Laura and Mr. Johnny Perez for your presentation. Something I knew little or nothing about other than what I get on TV and movies. So the question is there a place for solitary confinement within limits? And second of all, are you advocating for the complete elimination or a remodification and accountability of to use it in the proper way?
I can just jump in, Laura, so you also muted yourself, but I think there's what's happening and what's the goal. What's happening is that we've been limiting solitary down to 15 days, which is directly in line with, international standards about how we treat people, specifically, the Mandela rules. There's that. And then I think now, I'm not even now, but I think our general ideology is that people should only be isolated so long as they need to. Sometimes that's just hours. This idea that people need to be in there for days at a time. We understand it's in the juvenile system. You just need to sit down and cool down, breathe. And how far that goes and how people actually, how that actually functions. And I think there's been a number of models that have actually exemplified that those alternatives actually work. That solitary actually, that there's so many other alternatives that we haven't even given a chance to. Only in microcosm, we've seen it in some states and really small. The Maricopa program in New York. There was a specific jail in LA, I believe. And of course, we've seen countless models overseas in Sweden, Norway, and others with some of our, international partners. But in terms of limitations, it's solo only as long as we need to really assess what the situation is. And a lot of times that's really just hours. Our federal bill limits it to just 4 hours of isolation. So.
And Johnny, I want to lift up New York briefly as an example. The Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, which was passed into law, banning prolonged isolation beyond 15 days legislatively in that state, offers language that I think is really helpful, that we need temporary separation without isolation in order to address the root cause of the disturbance or harm. If that time is being used if that separation time is actually being used to address the root cause of the disturbance or what is happening with that person, which is really polar opposite to the idea of just locking that person and whatever the issue is really going on, locking it away. But I think also, Johnny, just to underscore your point, I mean, there are a number of efforts to take heads of departments of correction from states and visit places like Norway to see alternative models where a true rehabilitative process is the priority. And rehabilitation is something that's been clearly abandoned by what we're doing.
Well, Laura and Johnny, I would love this conversation to go on for another hour, but unfortunately, that's not our time frame. So let me just say thank you. And let me invite everybody on the call today whose photos are up just to give a silent clap for Laura and Johnny for their time. May I also just say this very, very straightforwardly. Leela's going to send you a follow-up email. Everybody who registered for this event, including those who were not able to attend after registering, are going to receive a copy of the video of this recording. May I propose to those of you who have some kind of connection to a community, an agency, a faith community, that you take this video with you and you invite a handful of people to sit down and watch it with you. This was as informative about a topic that just doesn't get enough airplay. And I'd like to just encourage us to get the word out as we can. So again, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Johnny. We're so grateful for your time. And we'd like to think that your being with us is going to actually impact somebody who gets engaged and does the work that I think is so important. So thank you. Thank you. I'd like to take a moment now just to mention that last month, we released a brand new program entitled Just Action: How to Advocate and Mobilize for Justice, which introduces participants to tools for action, advocacy, and organizing that are rooted in the Christian tradition and have inspired ordinary and extraordinary change makers throughout history. This skill-based program, which can be conducted virtually or in person, will begin by guiding your group. Now listen carefully. It guides your group to discern a social justice concern, for example, ending solitary confinement in prisons or creating more affordable housing or something, which your group will focus on throughout your time together in the program. And then with that social justice concern in mind, the Just Action process will introduce tools and principles to help you stand in solidarity with those affected by the issue, mobilize others for action, and advocate effectively for lasting change. And then during the last session, the final sessions, Just Action will guide participants in articulating a specific, achievable goal around your chosen focus area and help you create a 1 to 3 month action plan that incorporates the skills introduced in the program. What is exciting about this to me is that it can serve as a perfect follow-up to just about any of our other topical programs or any of the topics that are represented on our Acting for Justice events. Leela is putting a link in the chat for more information about that particular program. Finally, I'd like to invite you to next month's Acting for Justice event on Thursday, July 20th, for a presentation entitled Building Beloved Community and Boots on the Ground in South Carolina by Susan Stahl and Alicia Brewster, staff members of an organization called Village Engage. My sisters and brothers, this is essentially a story about how Just Faith inspired a large and effective community organizing effort. I hope you'll join us. And until then, let me close with prayer, very short prayer, with this adaptation of a quote from Meister Eckhart. If the only prayer I ever spoke was thank you, it would be enough. If the only greeting I ever spoke was welcome, it would be enough. If the only work I ever did was forgiveness, it would be enough. And if the only God I ever worshiped was love, it would be enough. Amen.